Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome. I'm Kim O'Keefe over here, if you can see where we're sitting. It's quite a big room, so I'd like to welcome you here this morning. So we've got Don up the front, is that correct? Yep, and who have you brought with you today? Good morning, welcome. We're not going to do formal introductions because there's too many of us, but we have got our name plaques in front of us. Just to let you know, it's a 6-minute presentation. The bell will ring at the 5-minute point and we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. So if you're ready to go, we're ready to go.
Well, I'm glad you told me when it's going to stop, because sometimes I don't know when to stop.
No, that's all right, and speak nice and clear into the microphone, that would be great.
Don Bryan is my name. I have a tertiary qualification in horticulture, and as you can see from me, many years of experience as well. I just want to say I tend to think that the 2050 report you've had so far, you haven't thought outside the square or outside the box. Judging from the people that you've talked to and the organisations you've talked to, they're mostly within the list of inside of the actual urban area of Shepparton, Kyalla and Mooroopna at this stage. I think it's time we started thinking outside the box. I think Shepparton's a very compact spot. Probably I can't think of another town in city in Victoria that's probably as compact, perhaps Horsham. But it's very good from the point of view of providing services, but it's not always good when it comes to the people that you're dealing with. I have a number of people in my wider family who are involved either as police or with police, and there's a few spots in Shepparton that they don't particularly want to go to because they get called there regularly. And it's almost always a spot where there's not much room to move. They're very close together, houses and that sort of thing, and that sort of problem seems to help exacerbate the factor that we have the police deal with. I'd just like to mention too that also Shepparton is it runs north and south along the river, so does Mooroopna, making use of the river as a feature, and I think that's very good. But remember that it's now 14 kilometres from the Verney Road intersection with the highway down to the racetrack, and distance is getting quite great. You've got a subdivision over on the northwest side of Mooroopna now, which is very good if the people can work locally there. But if they're going to try and travel to where the bulk of your commercial industrial area is, which is right over on the east side, then it's going to take them as long to get to work as it would be if they were driving from Toolamba or Mooroopna or Toolamba or Dookie or Tallygaroopna. So my comment is that I think it's time we started thinking about doing something about our rural towns, our satellite villages I call them, simply because they have the services there very often which are being underused. I've had a good look at most of the satellite towns, and they are underused. Our educational facilities, the schools are getting smaller, in fact, not bigger. The sporting facilities are often underused. I can assure you that if you were at Tallygaroopna and you'd like to be able to go to a feed at the pub or a beer at the pub, well, you won't be able to because there's no pub there. So there's just facilities of all type that are either underused or not in existence. So I think that we really have to start thinking about what we can do about those towns. Wangaratta, apparently there was money available from the state government quite some years ago now, probably about 2004, but I'll be guessing at roughly that time. And they applied through North East Water to get some of their rural towns sewered. That's the one thing that the towns haven't got, of course. And once they're sewered, of course, they start to develop. Over in Wangaratta, the satellite villages of Glenrowan, Oxley and Billawa were sewered, and the work was completed about 6 years ago. And since then, I've watched Oxley, for instance, particularly, and it's from being smaller than Dookie, it's now about twice the size of Dookie. There's a lot of people who like to live in a small country village away from the town. I suggest that probably people coming up from Melbourne or coming from Sydney to work here, and there's a lot of them doing that now, often look at outside the area, outside the square, as I said. The estate agents tell me that if there's a parcel of land available, a small parcel like, 3 to 5 acres and with a house on it, they'll have no trouble finding a market for it. They sell very quickly. In fact, I had a fellow come out to me the other day and say, I'll sell yours for you tomorrow if you want to. And I said, yeah, where am I going to go? That's the problem. So that's my beef about that. I think probably Wangaratta is setting us an example. Bendigo also is setting us an example as well. We visited Axedale. I don't know whether anyone knows Axedale or not. It's about 25 k's to the southeast of Bendigo, and we sort of noticed there's a lot of new houses there.
So 1 minute.
Is it? Right. A lot of new houses there, and Axedale has been sewered. It's 25 kilometres out. So I'll leave you to think about that, because I think that's part of our necessity for the future, is to live outside the box.
Thank you, Don. Is there anything else to add there, Don? Or is there any questions for Don? No? Jeff?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Don, thanks for that. I agree with you that Dookie needs, it would be good to get something done out there. The problem is with sewage, and that's the domain of Golden Valley Water. My question to you is, have you had some consultations with them over recent times?
Yes, the young lady who's now in charge of wastewater work with the Golden Valley Water. I had quite a long interview with her, probably some 6 or 8 months ago, prior to COVID, so probably 12 months ago now. And she rang me back a bit later and said, look, it has to come from council. It has to come from council. The initiative comes from council, you go to Golden Valley Water, and then I would assume that somehow you go to state government. The state government is the one who funds the wastewater treatment problem anyway. You'll find that if you go to Violet Town, for instance, it's some years ago that they were done, but you'll find that they gave people the option there, if you already had it installed, a super wastewater system, a suitable one, then you could leave that as your system until it was deemed to be unpractical anymore.
Thanks, Don.
Any other questions, councillors? Thank you very much, Don, and our aspiration is certainly to continue to support our small towns, and I think with the post-COVID, the obviously opportunity with people moving to regional areas, I think our small towns do have great opportunity for more growth, and we're certainly working with our steering committees and doing all that we can as a council, but we're always open to suggestions and development and investment. I mean, that's where it probably comes down to, bottom line. But thank you very much for coming in, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Take care of yourselves.
Madam Mayor and councillors, I say congratulations on being elected to represent the ratepayers of Shepparton. Given the very short amount of time that is available, I will use my time to discuss the main issue of my submission, Strategy 5.1 of the Growth Plan, to implement the Shepparton and Mooroopna Flood Mapping and Flood Intelligence Project into the Greater Shepparton Planning Scheme. 2 years ago, I was one of 2 ratepayers that presented both a verbal and written submission to Council, urging councillors not to adopt the Shepparton and Mooroopna Flood Mapping and Flood Intelligence Project. I argued that the flood study should not be adopted by Council, as I believed the study was inconsistent with federal, state and council policy. In response to the submissions, Council CEO engaged Russell Kennedy lawyers to provide councillors with a legal review of the submissions before they made their decision to adopt the study. In their tender bid, Water Technology, the authors of the flood study, claimed that Russell Kennedy was a key member of their study team. Water Technology said that Russell Kennedy lawyers are one of Victoria's leading local government and water authorities. With a rap like that, it's no surprise that the council's CEO engaged Russell Kennedy lawyers to provide councillors with a review of the Water Technology report. A summary of the Russell Kennedy legal advice to council was included into the council agenda of the 19th of March 2019, with the full advice listed as attachment 4. Russell Kennedy dismissed my objection, stating that there was no non-compliance with any legal or regulatory requirement in the Water Technology report. In my written submission, I have provided to council a copy of an email exchange obtained under FOI from the Golden Broken catchment, dated the 26th of April. In the email, Water Technologies advises council that the existing Goulburn Murray water channel, located to the south of the Harness Club, protects a major flow path from travelling through the Harness Club. The email confirmed that Goulburn Broken has identified a number of Goulburn Murray water channels which, if decommissioned, are required to be maintained as levee. And so, councillors, here is my concern. If Russell Kennedy is correct in their advice that there is no non-compliance with any government regulations in the Water Technologies flood study, how is it that the Victorian Floodplain Management Strategy, Policy 17C, says where there is flood mitigation infrastructure that is not being formally managed, the relevant municipal planning scheme must not assume that the infrastructure will provide flood protection. And they say that the relevant municipal flood emergency plan must provide for the potential of sudden and complete failure of that infrastructure. Councillors, in the Victorian Floodplain Management Strategy, they identify 25 Goulburn Murray water channels that act as unmaintained levees in Shepparton. Now, the big questions for council now to consider, in my opinion, are when the next big flood hits and the Goulburn Murray water channels that are not being formally managed suddenly and completely fail, causing tidal waves of floodwater crashing through the homes and shops in Shepparton, who's going to pay? Where in council's emergency management plan has council planned for the potential of sudden and complete failure of the unmaintained Goulburn Murray water channels? Has council informed their insurance company that they have adopted and now intend to implement a flood study that relies upon Goulburn Murray water channels to provide flood protection for properties and lives that has the potential for sudden and complete failure? Have council's insurance company agreed to provide unlimited cover to our community for this eventuality? And finally, if the Insurance Council of Australia determines that council's decision to implement the flood study that's in the 2050 strategy, in defiance of the state government policy 17C, presents an unacceptable risk for their members, will their members decide to either dramatically increase insurance premiums throughout our city or just classify all properties in Shepparton as flood affected and refuse to insure anything? This is what's happening in the mountains. You go up to Mount Buller, can't get insurance. This is a very real thing with climate change. We have this system on the council's own FOI that you're relying upon something that the state government says you can't do.
1 minute. Thanks, Gordon.
Councillors, welcome to Shepparton Council. Shepparton's future is in your hands. Will you close your eyes and hope it doesn't rain for the next 4 years? Or will you just put it right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon. Are there any questions, councillors? No? Thank you very much, Gordon.
Good morning, everybody. Not used to having everybody so far away from me, but it's great that we could resume after that little interruption of the fire alarm. I'm here this morning to make a submission to the 2050 Growth Plan on behalf of the Committee for Greater Shepparton. Just by way of introduction, the committee was established in 2013 and represents a voice for the Greater Shepparton community and is active in all areas of economic development and promoting the area as a livable, attractive area to come and live and invest and visit. The committee has a really close relationship with the council, as many of you would be aware, and we work closely with state and other local governments in the area and industry bodies to really promote our region as a fantastic one. We represent about 104 members, and the members are from a very diverse base of businesses and not-for-profit organisations. So we really do have a lot of people that we can talk to and that we can draw information from and that come to us to talk about their businesses and their involvement with the community. We comprise a 7-member board, of which I am a board member. As CEO, Sam Birrell, who is an apology this morning as he's enjoying some Christmas leave, and staff at the committee as well. So the Committee for Greater Shepparton supports the 2050 strategy and the adoption of a plan that will really guide the development of this Shepparton and Mooroopna area well into the future. We support a plan that's nimble and flexible to enable it to adapt to things that come at us like COVID-19. Nobody foresaw that coming, but we need to be adaptable. We need to be able to pivot quickly and to respond to those curveballs that life throws at us. The main concern, I guess, that we have in talking to industry bodies and talking to our board is the lack of supply that will hit us probably in about 1.5 to 2 years. So that is a real concern for the greater Shepparton area, particularly Shepparton and Mooroopna, and being able to have that supply that will see us through the next 1 to 2 years to 5 years to when some of those bigger growth corridors come online. We need multiple growth fronts and we need a continual review of the supply and demand, and we agree with the comment that was in the executive summary about reviewing the supply and demand every 5 years to check that our growth fronts are suitable, appropriate and working for us. We also submit that Shepparton's becoming quite an elongated city. It's becoming very north-south aligned, and we also, that has some implications on travel distance and accessibility into the CBD. And we also submit that industry land should be able to coexist with some renewable energy capabilities, often referred to as green industrial parks, and we submit that that should be a continued focus of the 2050 strategy. So in terms of some of the solutions to some of the submissions that we have raised in our submission, we'd like to see some more frequent and better collaboration with industry. So real estate agents, local developers, servicing authorities, people on the ground that are able to ground truth what's going on. The committee is certainly happy to facilitate some of these discussions if that would be appropriate. We need to find out what land is realistically available. It might be zoned, but whether that's available is another question. So we need that frequent ground truthing with those on the ground to really understand what's happening out there. We'd like council to work with council or to council to put in some initiatives to fast track the processing of getting land to a developable state. We are aware that there are some constraints which I touch on in my next point about the state government process and the planning system that we are all bound to work under, but we'd like to see some fast tracking, so whether that's allowing industry to come in and really work with council to get some land on the ground that's right and ready to go, whether that's looking for opportunities of less constrained land and fast tracking those through the process that we need to follow. Focus council officer resources on identifying those lands and undertaking those investigations. We'd also like to work with council to lobby the state government to review the planning red tape. The system for a piece of land to take 10 plus years sometimes to be identified as residential to actually being able to put a house on a block of land is just not on, and it's just causing a lot of heartaches, additional costs, and a burden on local government resources in particular. So we need to work with council to lobby state government to really review those bureaucratic processes. And as I touched on before, the 2050 strategy needs to be flexible to allow appropriate
Just one more minute, Jane,
opportunities within a reasonable distance accessibility into the CBD. We don't want Shepparton to becoming longer and longer and longer. We understand there's some constraints to that, but look at some opportunities where we might have a more equitable geographic spread of our city. And that, just the way in summary, moving forward, a healthy supply of residential land that's ready to go continuously over the next 15 years is really essential to sustain and promote Shepparton and Mooroopna as a great place to live in, to invest in and to visit. We really want to promote population growth and work actively, not just rely on the Victorian future projections, but to really actively pursue some population growth to support the regional infrastructure investment in the likes of GV Health, Secondary College, SAM and road and rail upgrades. And just lastly, I'd just really like to say in all of this, we need to maintain our regional competitive advantage. We are different. We like to celebrate that point of difference. We don't want to just become a repetition of all the suburban sprawl in Melbourne.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
That's fantastic, great presentation, and obviously we do work very closely with the Committee for Greater Shepparton, so we're looking forward for that to continue, and obviously we can have much more in-depth further discussions regarding those points that you've actually pointed out today, so that's great. We look forward to obviously continuing with those conversations.
Yeah.
Apologies again for the delay and
No, that's okay.
not doing formal introductions, it sort of got away on me, but always great to catch up with you, and thank you
Terrific.
again for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any questions, anyone, before we, Jane, go?
Excuse me, Jane. Could you comment on, I guess, either the committee or your view on development east of Doyles Road?
Yeah, so the committee's view is that, without getting into all the in-depth detail of the work that's been done more recently by RMCG in terms of the agricultural, there are areas of agricultural importance in that area, and there is an overall objective to retain areas of agricultural significance, but that's why we're asking this plan to be a little bit nimble and a little bit flexible to see if there are some opportunities that could start to geographically equally distribute the urban framework of our city. So there could be some opportunities in there, but we as a committee haven't looked in any great detail of particular parcels of land. Yeah, but just the plan needs to incorporate that flexibility. Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Brophy?
Jane, thank you for the presentation. You make mention in the submission that the developers are of the view that the VPA's involvement with Greater Shepparton has seen it been, made the whole process somewhat slow and created some inflexibility in that. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Is that the developers' view that you've heard from, or is it the Committee for Greater Shepparton's view?
That's a view essentially from a lot of the developers that we've spoken to. So it's coming from them, but I guess in my my profession as a town planner, I probably concur a little bit with that view, in that it's sometimes difficult to get outsiders who come in here and understand what's happening here on the ground and the development that's needed here in the likely timeframes. Sometimes having a lot of government organisations talk to each other relaxes some of the urgency around those conversations that need to happen, whereas if a different body's probably driving that, even a council body driving that, you can get some more expedited outcomes. And the VPA they're very, they started as the Growth Areas Authority. They started as the Melbourne Planning Authority. So their mindset is very metropolitan focused. And to apply some of the metropolitan standards, for example, areas of open space where we can just go down the road 5 or 10 minutes and we're in some of the most beautiful, pristine open spaces available, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the metropolitan standards and the regional standards. And trying to really reinforce those regional attributes is really important and sometimes not seen by the likes of the VPA.
Thank you.
Okay, we've probably got time for one more question. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thanks again
Have
for
a
your
lovely
time.
day.
Yep,
Terrific.
thanks.
Dear planning team and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to express my suggestions for our future growth plan. Decisions made now will have many long-term effects on our community, and we need to be very aware of potential consequences of these decisions as we progress into the future. My concerns are based around the need to improve the consequences of our impact on our fragile environment. I would like to see Greater Shepparton City Council making some very powerful and forward-thinking decisions. These are my suggestions. Vegetation. With every new estate, industrial or housing, and including roadsides and parklands, we increase the amount of vegetation required, including trees, understory plants, ground coverings and grasses. Whilst I think Greater Shepparton do this very well, I would really like to see us set a precedent and do this even better. All nature strips, new and older, should have plants and trees. In our hot climate and even hotter to come, it makes sense to plant Indigenous species that tolerate our climate and make the maintenance easier in the long term, whilst encouraging more bird life. A minimum requirement of vegetation increased from the existing requirement for each developer to supply for each estate. There are some parklands within council areas that are all Indigenous and already regenerating themselves in an ideal scenario. There's a really good example of that in Banfield Avenue, Mooroopna, just off that roundabout. There's a beautiful park there with Indigenous plants, and the same with our lake area. With routine weeding out of non-Indigenous species such as ash trees and peppercorn trees, this allows for local species to thrive. Moving around Greater Shepparton, many of us really enjoy more walking, riding bikes and getting around on mobility scooters. Sadly, for many, this can be difficult. While Shepparton City Council provides some wonderful pathways and bike tracks, there are many outlying areas, including Mooroopna, that lack pathways even quite close to the main shopping areas. Commuters and families should have the opportunity to ride a bike or walk to their place of work away from dangerous busy traffic. There are great opportunities to reach rivers and bushlands also quite close to towns, but not enough pathways and bike tracks. Shepparton does this really well. Mooroopna and some of the other outlying areas could do with some more pathways. With improved pathways, Greater Shepparton could encourage many of us to leave our cars at home and use other methods of physical transport around our spaces. We also need to invest in electric recharge stations for electric cars. These are going to be the future of vehicle transportation, along with improved public transport. Our waste, the waste and rubbish we produce, needs to be processed in a much more sustainable manner. Greater Shepparton City Council could look at a local recycling facility, saving on transporting our recyclables away, and we would know that our plastics and glass, etc., have actually been recycled and not going into landfill. Energy efficient homes. As an owner of a new, very energy efficient home, there are some very simple changes developers could take on to improve greenhouse gas emissions and save on energy costs. Greater Shepparton Planning could have some input into developers' plans. All new housing estates could be planned so that each block has the opportunity to north face their homes for solar gain. Some developers do not allow visible solar panels from the street. This is quite ludicrous, as we need to be encouraging the use of panels. If there is a way to encourage the use of water tanks in smaller homes with large gardens, these things can make quite a difference to our lifestyles and a cleaner future. This is a very brief overview of my thoughts, and I am more than happy to make myself available for further discussion. And before I finish, I would like to read you a quote by Barack Obama that I feel we should all take into consideration when planning for the future. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. I'll leave these here if anybody would like to take a copy with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deborah. We've just got a couple of minutes for questions. Do any councillors have any questions you'd like to ask Deborah? No? Thank you very much. Well
Great.
done.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day, Deborah. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Sorry. Yeah, well, we've been out at Graham Vale since 2005. Obviously, it's a great area to live, and we've got 25 acres out there. Our neighbours have got similar, and a couple of other neighbours that are close to us, bigger and better areas. So we've been trying for the last probably 3 years to get included into the 2050 growth strategy. And we're just really struggling to get any kind of traction at all through council to get involved. We've come to the agricultural study survey and stuff like that, and that was pretty one-sided. It just seemed to be heading straight down the agricultural land only thing. We were disappointed with that outcome. It was there was no investigation into industrial land or residential land. They were just hell-bent on keeping it as agricultural land. In 2015, they had the last part of Dalton's estate got developed, and even through the council's own report there, they've got it, I'll probably quote it if I have to. The proximity of the residential land makes productive farming on the subject land very difficult. The subject land is better suited to low-density residential uses. Obviously, we agree with that finding, but ever since then we can't get any kind of traction with council. Obviously, the way that in the August last year, the council meeting, when they tried to put the 2050 item to vote on the agenda at the last minute. A couple of councillors we spoke to about that were, didn't understand probably the magnitude of what was trying to get through. We emailed all the councillors since then, and they did change to create this improved consultation process. And again, that's why we're here again. At the end of the day, we're just normal Shepparton people. We're not, pushing huge developments or whatever. We just want to have a fair go. As all you councillors do know, that's your guys' responsibility to make sure there's a level playing field for everyone. And all we want to do is just basically get an opportunity to get included in these into this study. We actually have got a lot of friends and stuff that we've had people drive past our house and knock on our door, say, what are the chances of subdividing? We'd say we'd love to do it, we just really struggle to get it through council, and that's why we're here today. We just really want to get the opportunity to, have a chance to subdivide. Because at the moment we're fixated on north-south. We have the super school where it is now, which is 3.5 k's from where we live at Dobson's, back in onto Dobson's Estate. I personally ride my bike to SPC every day, which is about the same journey as kids. It's an 11-minute bike ride. The super school was never part of the 2050 study, and I do believe that with the traffic congestion around the super school, Notre Dame, and Welsford Street there, it's going to be absolutely bedlam. Everyone coming in from north-south. It's already bad enough now, so once that super school reopens, it'll get worse. And really, the whole dynamics around the 2050 growth strategy with the population growth, with the COVID-19 implications, it's really reset the whole accuracy of any of those population growths, because the working from home model now has obviously become very popular. So really the end of the reliability of all these forecasts and stuff are pretty much thrown out the window. Like, a lot of population growth is coming from Melbourne and stuff, but people are working remotely. With the Dobson's Estate, there's obviously it's a very popular area. It's close to town, close to all the facilities, and basically our back paddock runs on to the end of Dobson's Road, which is basically just sitting there waiting to, for something to happen. And like, they have done the other little bits and pieces over the last 5 and 10 years, and that's all been sold out. So it's just a natural progression, we would have thought, to extend that down there. Like making the certain places out past Kyalla and Kungupna as, an alternative just seems a bit strange to us, as a family. Why would you want to, go 8, 10, 12 k's past, where you are now, and we're only 3 k's away from the super school and pretty close, very close to the hospital and all that kind of stuff. So, we're not developers or anything like that. We just want to actually, have a fair and honest playing field for everyone.
1 more minute.
Yep.
And then some questions, thanks.
That's right. So that's pretty much all we're after, is just a fair and honest, a level playing field, because, whatever happens in the future, it affects Nicholas and our daughter, so, yeah.
Thank you, Brendan. How long has it been since you've used that land? Like, what's the land been used for now?
Nothing.
Yeah, I thought I do know your story.
Yeah,
so how long has it been since there's been any, growth or
I think
plantation, or was it 12 years or something? I read something.
We've been there for 16.
Okay,
so
longer,
the
yeah.
Anderson subdivided and cleared that, would have been 25, 30 years
Okay,
ago.
so a long time. So it's just sitting dormant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
been dormant.
what's the size of the parcel of the land again?
Altogether, we've got 25. The Andersons have got 25, and Sue and Fezzi have got 40 on that place. So there's 90, and next door the Suleimans have got another 40, but they still actually use that for a bit of cropping, and they're on the last rotation on the plums on that one now. So.
Yeah, I was out there about 6 months ago. I think we went for a bit of a drive, trying to work it out. So, any other councillors have any questions for Brendan?
Brendan, thanks very much for coming in, and the map. If I look at that, the blue area that you've highlighted here, is that just your property, or does that include...
No, that's the 3 places.
That's the 3 places combined?
Thanks.
And could you just quickly describe to me what the farming conditions are on the surrounding properties? Are they all orchard, or...?
No, on the east side, it's the Wares, and they do cropping, and they've got the whole thing's under pipe and riser. They got a government grant probably about 8 to 10 years ago, and they've got that all in a pipe and riser, and the Shoalies have still got an orchard on the western side.
Yep, great.
But all the three last, it's basically a fire hazard. So we do have some biological mowers out there just to keep the weeds down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much for coming in today, Brendan.
Right.
Essentially, we could go on for a long time with this, and I'm sure you've heard this from every other presenter. But this submission is on behalf of a group of landholders adjacent to Dawes Road between Benalla Road and Old Dookie Road. These submissions that I'm sure you've all read, so I won't go into the absolute detail in the submissions, but the submissions are all about the lived and living experience of generations of hard-working horticultural families, the historical backbone of commercial productivity in Shepparton for generations. So these people are representative of fundamentally a lot of people that are in the close proximity on the urban fringe of Shepparton. It's not about the younger generation wanting to retire and cash the farms either. This is all about people recognising the changing environment that we find ourselves in. This is about the existing conditions and the consequences of the growth of Shepparton on farming use and development in this area and probably in other areas, and I'm sure you've had representations from other areas with a similar sort of outcome. What we're trying to do here is to highlight this as a planning issue that needs to be addressed. So we're not coming in here saying these are individual people that have got an individual personal issue that we want dealt with through this document. We're looking at it as a strategic planning issue. So non-farming urban use and development has encroached and fragmented the farmland in this close to the inner city area of Shepparton, bringing with it all the adverse impacts that render commercially productive horticulture economically and practically unviable. It's an inevitability. It happens as urban growth moves out, these sorts of things occur. And in an urban planning context, what's happening here is a normal part of the process of urban expansion. What is not consistent with the urban planning context is the failure to recognise the changing situation and to change zoning and development opportunity to better reflect the existing and emergent circumstances. So we're talking about what's physically and economically impacting on the land use and the development of these specific areas. This is particularly relevant given the relatively close proximity to the city centre and the urban services and the good availability of infrastructure. In an urban planning context, it might reasonably be expected that this area be evaluated for urban growth change before some of the greenfield sites. The greenfield sites that are at considerably greater distance from the city centre and existing urban services. I'm aware that some of the other submitters have made reference to the fact that we should be looking at areas closer to the city centre, and we would support that point of view. Irrespective as to which way one might evaluate this location and what urban form might take priority, it is indisputable that the current farming operations have reached their end point. Increasingly, viability is being adversely impacted by urban encroachment and fragmentation issues. For example, inclusive of pressure to desist in necessary farming practices like use of scare guns, pesticide spray use, packing shed noise, day and night, heavy vehicle and machinery use, and so on. This is so to the extent that encroaching residents have called police in the past to seek the police to intervene in what has traditionally been normal horticultural practices. So it's something that builds over time, and it's pressure that gets put onto the actual farming viability. These are all, some traditionalist planners might argue that these are peripheral matters to the planning issue, but my experience, and I've been in this game for about 30 years, is that these are the integral things that influence land use. These are the things that dictate how we should be looking at strategic planning in locations, irrespective of where and how it comes together. These are the issues that need to be assessed and evaluated. Simply put, the urban encroachment and fragmentation in all its forms has made commercially productive agriculture a redundant use in this location, and it is the responsibility of the council as the planning authority to undertake the necessary strategic planning action as a priority to keep abreast of the changing circumstances generated by urban growth. The 2050 strategic planning is the appropriate process and tool to address these issues across the greater city of Shepparton. The easy strategic planning approach is to spread to greenfields locations as the developer's lowest cost options and where land is known to be desired by developers, and there is a place for that, but as a priority it is our contention that council should address the more difficult inner and existing fringe areas, strategic planning in a more holistic city development approach. So I guess what we're saying is we recognise that there's a need for greenfield sites, but we also want a balance to include strategic planning that addresses the much harder to deal with issues that confront us on the urban fringe areas, such as the area of land on Doyle's Road, between Benalla and Old Dookie, and probably in other locations. We acknowledge there will likely be other locations that create somewhat similar planning contexts and drivers for strategic change, and we accept that the council responsibilities and resources will be stretched by these strategic planning issues. However, we say these should be prioritised because people's lives and livelihoods are closely impacted by the urban expansion, causing change to their circumstances. Again, we say that that's a fundamental impact on land use and subsequently development, and it is genuinely a planning issue that should be considered, even though the probability is you'll have some planning people say that, well, no, they're personal issues and they shouldn't be brought into it. They're not personal issues in the context of strategic planning. They're the issues that generate consideration of what it is that forms the use of the land. At this point, we're not seeking to tell council or the expert planners what the specific solutions are for the issues we raise, but suffice to say, we want the issues acknowledged and acceptance for the need for early zoning change included in the 2050 strategic documentation and any consequent changes to strategic planning inclusions in the planning scheme. We're seeking the ability to work with council generally in accord with 2050 plan to achieve the necessary change outcomes, whatever the correct specific result returns out to be. So we're not coming here today to say rezone our land to residential or rezone our land to industrial or where to draw boundaries or any of that sort of thing. We've come here today to say, please councillors, there are some serious issues related to land use and development here. They are impacting on people's lives, and we're asking council to acknowledge that that exists and to set in train under the strategic plan an early opportunity to undertake the necessary work and to work with this part of our community to generate satisfactory outcomes. So we don't want to try and drive council's agenda, we just want to be able to work through this process and get the right outcome. There's probably a whole lot more stuff in specific detail that we could go to, but you've got most of it in the submissions and it's not much point in me going over it again. But I think the point that we make clear is we're specifically asking for this as a series of issues to be recognised in the plan and provision made for planning scheme amendments to be dealt with through a strategic planning process more specific to this location as a part of the 2050 plan. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Ron. That was really easy to follow too, so thank you for that. Do any councillors have any questions? Councillor Brophy?
Thank you, Ron. I know you're representing a number of people along Doyle's Road there. We have, is it Lois and Bill with us today? Thank you for coming along. I'd be really interested because the dwelling, I think you're at 171 Doyle's Road, was there long before the bypass, and the impact from a noise level, and maybe perhaps what's been done to eradicate, from your end of things, the highway. You've got MC Pipes up the road, and you've got Freedom Foods as well there as well. The noise level and the impact that's had, perhaps in more recent years, I'd be really interested to know what that impact is, because I don't live there, so I'd really like to know that.
I think I can probably answer that. Yeah. My advice has been that the changes in traffic in so many different ways has impacted the lifestyle and amenity of the area. We recognise that it's not a residential zone at this point. We recognise that there's industrial land across the road, and there's impacts from that, not just the traffic. So traffic is a problem in terms of noise, in terms of volume, access and ability to get in and out of the properties, dust, and dust from the industrial development on the other side of the road's the same. Because it's a major traffic thoroughfare, we now have vehicles using the service road on the opposite side for parking up of semis overnight with refrigerated equipment running all night. There's a whole range of those sorts of things. We've got different sort of interactions between transport operators using the service road. There's just so many different things like that that we could go down into the detail that are part of this change that is occurring as a consequence of the expansion and growth of the city of Shepparton. It's something, they're the symptomatic things that lead to the need for change and create the questionable viabilities of existing land use activities. Hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. Does anyone else have any questions? Greg?
Thanks, Ron, for coming today, and thank you also to Bill and Lois. Just a question, you mentioned indicated in there about attracting the tourist dollars and how we need to cater for them. We did attract a lot of the tourist dollars last year and a lot of tourism to town. Can I ask what would be your group's suggestions in how we can accommodate that, or how we can improve in that?
Tourism is a really fickle industry. There's so many different things that can be developed and used as a tourism opportunity. Doyle's Road, as a bypass, has a lot of opportunities for, perhaps we call them fruit sales, or we might call them other activity type sales. We might call them servicing the tourist. There could be things like fuel stations. There could be things like, potentially accommodation at a commercial level, which might be, it might be a caravan park, it might be budget accommodation, it might, generally speaking, you don't get the high-end accommodation out of the city centre, but it could be all the other accommodations that run peripheral to that. To look at tourism as a specific component that reflects in the area that we're talking about for Doyle's Road needs to be looked at in the broader context of how your tourism planning is done for the whole city of Shepparton, and probably even wider than that. Because if you try and focus the detail into a certain area without looking at it in context with everything else, you're going to get it wrong. There's any amount of planning exercises over the generations that have shown if you don't deal with things of that nature in a holistic manner, you end up making mistakes. So I probably haven't answered the question all that well, but specifically in Doyle's Road, there's potential opportunities, but they need to be seen in the context of the wider tourism planning.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Ron. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time, and Bill and Lois as well. Thank you.
So, as I just mentioned, I'm Casey Collins. I'm a town planner from Spire, and I have Alan and Loretta with me today, the owners of 250 Mackaysack Road, Mooroopna. My client's land is approximately 80 hectares in area and located to the immediate west of the future Shepparton bypass route. So it's a bit hard to show. Are we able to put a pointer up there, or? So if you just go up a little bit, up a bit further, and then to the left a bit more. So, yep, the other side, if you move up a little bit, yep, that's their parcel of land there. Thank you. Our client has previously operated a dairy farm on the land, but like many others in the area, the dairy wasn't sustainable given the size of the land. More recently, they've grown fodder on the land, but and provided to the nearby dairy farm, but that dairy farm has since ceased operation. The existing Mooroopna framework plan and the proposed draft plan don't identify any future rural residential land in the Mooroopna area. All of the land within the settlement boundary for Mooroopna is either identified for future standard residential or significantly impacted. The background documents to the growth plan note that 63% of rural residential land supply is located outside defined town boundaries, often adjacent to smaller townships, with a considerable amount of land located to Tura. The report also notes there's only 19 vacant rural residential lots in the Shepparton and Mooroopna area. All must be in Shepparton, as there is no vacant rural residential lots that I'm aware of around Mooroopna. The 2020 Land Supply Review acknowledges there is a low demand for rural residential, but notes that this is largely due probably to the lack of supply that's actually available. So it's very hard to determine what a demand is when there actually is no supply there. Given this, it's considered important Council undertake consultation with the local land development industry, including agents, consultants, developers, landowners, to more accurately determine the demand for this type of lots in the Mooroopna area. Whilst there may be supply in other smaller towns, many still want that rural living lifestyle, but close to larger towns with easy accesses to services such as Mooroopna. And I note that our clients actually is connected to reticulated water, so that's one bonus. You still get that rural lifestyle, but have those additional services that you get in town. Given all the land within the settlement boundary has also been identified for future standard residential or is flood impacted, it is considered the land to the immediate west of the future bypass, such as the Gorns land, as an appropriate option for future rural residential. As such, we ask that further investigation be undertaken on the demand for rural residential in the Mooroopna area and our client's land be considered. Just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak and take any questions.
Thank you, Casey. Do any councillors have any questions? Jeff?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for coming in. The rural residential, how do you describe the size of the rural residential that you'd be suggesting?
So rural residential can vary. So typically speaking, low density is half acre. For this parcel of land, I'd probably be looking at larger lots, so more rural living zoning, which would look at more of a 1 hectare size. But obviously a lot of investigations need to be undertaken to determine appropriate lot size.
Yep.
Yeah.
So. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much for coming in,
Short
Casey.
and sweet. Thank
Nice
you.
to see you. Short, easy done. Thank you.
I should have brought my glasses so I could see.
Oh dear.
No, thank you very much to the councillors for taking the time to hear me and the other submitters today. But also congratulate the council for taking the time and to show interest in this, the Greater Shepparton 2050 Regional Growth Plan, and for taking the time not only to understand the document but also the background and the processes that have gone on beforehand, and to drill into those and to understand what's going on. So congratulate you and thank you for that opportunity. But this morning I will talking to you about a submission we made on behalf of Joseph Closter and other landholders in an area. They have the land that's north of Grahamvale Road, between Grahamvale Road and Verney Road, but north of Ford Road. So if you imagine going out Verney Road out towards the grammar school to Ford Road, the land on your right-hand side there. So through to Grahamvale Road and north of Ford Road, and then through to the Radio Australia site.
Yep.
So that's the land that we wanted to speak about. But also I just wanted to speak generally about housing in Greater Shepparton, and And really, we've sort of got two competing or contradicting situations. On the one hand, we've got plenty of land, we've got plenty of development going on, and that's all great. But on the other hand, there's a real squeeze for affordability and accessibility, especially at that bottom end of the market. And whether that's breaking into the market or private rental, it's a real challenge. But any opportunities that we can open up in any part of the housing sector is going to alleviate pressures in other sectors. So I see identifying enough land to see us through these next 30 years is going to make more opportunity for people to be able to get into those corridors, but also free up opportunity for rental and other opportunities at that bottom end of the market, which is a completely other discussion that we could go on for quite a while. But I am concerned that the growth plan doesn't identify enough residential opportunities. We need some flexibility in location and type over the next ensuing period. Over the past decade or so, we've had Kyla Lakes, Seven Creeks in the south, Boulevard Estate, north side, Connolly Park all in the north. All of these estates are coming to an end, winding up. The final stages are sold. So all of those sort of staple housing supply options are all being wound up. And we know the immense lead-in times to bring land online. The North-East Growth Corridor, South-East Growth Corridor have been going for 15 years. North-East is now online. South-East has got some time to go. And that's not being critical of this council. That's just a consequence of what it takes to bring land online under the current regs. So to that end, with this growth plan being a roadmap for the next 30 years, I believe we need more options. When you look at that growth framework plan on page 34 of the growth plan, realistically, Radio Australia is the only option in the north. That's the plan up there. The land we're looking at is between that north-east growth corridor and Radio Australia, so basically between those two blobs. And we see that as just a natural progression from that north-east growth corridor, just heading north towards Radio Australia. Radio Australia will come online one day. It's got a lot to go through. There are some constraints and some considerations there to go through before that will come online. But more importantly, I'm concerned with the leapfrogging and the cost in bringing infrastructure to there. In particular, Verney Road. We've seen Verney Road be upgraded progressively from Shep High School, Balaclava Road onwards. And if residential development was to proceed in that direction, it would provide for and allow for that, also that upgrading of Verney Road and the bringing of services. So we see that it's a much more sequential progression from the existing urban boundary out towards that way. So that's the submission that's been made on behalf of Gloucester. There's about there's about 7 landholders with about 8 land parcels making up about 50% of that block of land that have put their name to this submission that said that they would be interested in seeing this land identified for future residential over the time.
So just one more minute. Thanks. That's a 1 minute bell.
I'm done. Right on the bell.
Done.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Thank you
thanks
for
again
that.
for your time. Happy to answer any
Thanks,
questions.
Gary. Any questions? Anyone? Councillor Brophy?
Thanks, Gary. Just a quick question. Given your background, and you've been here for some time in the planning area, you were talking about the lead-in time, for the properties to be developed and into residential, if it was to be classified that. What would be a time frame in your mind if it went through in the 2050 plan about getting that up and running and to the stage where it could actually be blocks of land being sold?
Look, probably on paper it could be as soon as 5 years, but probably in practicality, it's probably getting more to the 10 to 15 years. Once this growth plan is adopted, there's planning scheme amendments to see that strategic direction put into the planning scheme, then allows pre-planning to occur and ultimately the land rezoned, and then you can start your sort of site-specific planning, permit applications and so on. So,
Thank you.
So tick through all of those one by one in sequential order, and you're probably in that sort of 10 to 15 year bracket.
Anyone else? Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Gary, for coming in. Gary, can you just let councillors know what the current use of that land is? I know it pretty well, but just let us know again what's on there currently, and what infrastructure is around in terms of water and so on and so forth.
So it's previously and still is largely a fruit growing area. Immediately there on the corner you've got Masolki's orchard, which I believe has some reasonable infrastructure on it, and on the other side over the Grahamvale Road end there's Visi.
Yeah.
So then there's significant infrastructure there. Apart from that, the smaller farms, traditional farms, and in the centre, Joseph Closter has 2 properties that were former orchards, and he's pushed those orchards out and is just doing some cattle grazing on that land.
Yeah. One other question. I noticed you've got one section of land left out on your plan here. Is that the Visi land that with an irregular boundary?
Yes. Yep, it is. Yep. And Joseph's is the land directly to the north of that.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Gary.
Okay, any other questions? No? Thank you very much, Gary, for coming in.
Yeah, I'm on behalf of the Kyola Central Consortium Subdivision Group. That consists of myself, my wife Sonia. We're at 365 Mitchell Road, Dr. David and Anna Dalton at 425 Mitchell Road, and Victor and Mary Cirillo at 70 Central Kyola Road. We're all 3 properties are within the current regional growth plan settlement boundary. We're providing this proposal in addition. I believe you'll have at 11 o'clock Urba's proposal for the overall Kyola Central development from Archer Road through to Kyola Central Road, Mitchell Road, and then in the south and River Road in the north. This proposal is a development for the Kyola Central Township in the immediate future. So the proposal of the development of the township is low density residential 1 acre blocks along Kyola Central Road and Mitchell Road. We think it will assist in the growth of the township, Kyola Central Primary School, St Anne's, and professionals and their family looking to relocate to Shepparton. Now, the Kyola Central Township was identified in the 2030 growth plan as requiring immediate action. So much so that the settlement boundary was realigned and land was immediately rezoned to the south of Mitchell Road, even though there was vast amounts of land within the existing settlement boundary. And personally, I've been attempting to develop for the last 10 years with no success. Now, I'll just refer to map 2. That's a bit difficult to read, but in the green markings is where we're looking to develop the 1 acre blocks along. That's Kyola Central Road in the far and Mitchell Road in the east here, and you'll see the existing. In the pink area, that was rezoned and the settlement boundary adjusted and rezoned. And our concern was that the only difference between our proposal and the proposal across the road was the employer, the owner of the property was an employer of the council, which was, either way, it sets a precedent that. Developments are looking to proceed around the Kyola Central area, and with the ownership being that way, we were concerned about transparency. But now the public transparency policy was adopted in last year, we feel as though we're much more comfortable with our application.
Can I interrupt for a second there, Dallas? Sorry.
Yep.
That previous slide, I'm having some difficulty orientating. I can see the pink block.
Yep.
That's the sole property. What's the significance of the green?
That's right. That was redeveloped and rezoned in the growth plan. That was a number of years ago now, and we've had no success since developing our own land. But originally, the settlement boundary ran along Mitchell Road and up Kyola Central Road. Now, the settlement boundary was realigned to fit that pink property in, and then rezoned immediately. Whereas we were inside the settlement boundary with no joy, so that's the significance of that, how that was able to be rezoned and realigned, but people within the original settlement boundary were unable to, progress, but as I said, that's clearly set the precedent. Now, we feel the benefits of this sorry, this one. Sorry, and also, just the concern here was the only other thing with the public transparency policy. I came across the Greater Shepparton Freight and Land Use Study of 2013, and the dotted line down the bottom there, -998. I know it's difficult to read, but that looks as though it's a planned truck route or joins the highway, and that runs directly through our properties that we're talking about. So we just need clarification or confirmation that that's not going to proceed. Rezoning. We think the benefits of the rezoning. As these properties lie on the settlement boundary, will provide an integration from the rural farming and the residential properties, as that shows behind the green dash line, all that broadacre farmland is to be residential in future. So, you integrate from farmland into the residential. And with the 1 acre blocks, we feel it'll provide diversity to available properties being 1 acre blocks, and with the unprecedented regional growth due to COVID, especially being the Melbourne side of Shepparton, it provides alternatives and will be attractive to possible purchasers. And we're just saying with a proactive council having land available rather than reactive. Currently there doesn't seem to be any blocks available. People are waiting for the blocks to be listed, so that's a concern. And also with the cost saving with more blocks available.
So just one more minute, thanks, Doug.
Yep, we'll be able to control our rate rises, and I think last time I presented, our rates were 37% greater than the average rates around Victoria, so that needs to be addressed as well. And I just wanted to reiterate that's the crux of this, but to support the presentation at 11 o'clock through Tony Onley's group, I just wanted to let you know that we're in full support of that, and we'll and so that all landowners acting in the same interest for the full development of the Kyla Central Precinct. Thank you.
Thank you, Dallas. Do we have any questions, councillors? Councillor Dobson?
Yeah, thanks, Dallas, for your presentation. Can you go back to your map where it shows the green and the pink, just for my own ignorant self here? Tell me about the pink again in your mind. What's that zone currently?
In the 2030 growth plan, the settlement boundary, it's a bit hard, so that green line, if it continues, that's Mitchell Road.
Yes.
And in the original growth plan, that settlement boundary ran directly to the corner and then straight up Kyla Central Road. So
yes.
That was the extent of it. And then next time I seen the growth plan, it had been realigned, the settlement boundary had been realigned, and the properties in the pink had been rezoned. Like, we'd been trying for a number of years for the same, but we were unable to get any joy or any progress there. But somehow, and that's what I'm saying, that's the concern I have with, the ownership of that property being with the employer of the Greater Shepparton City Council, and with the public transparency policy now in place from last year. That may not have happened, but that's the point of that. So we're looking to do it within the settlement boundary, and this one, that kind of sets the precedent for, being allowed to progress with our plans.
And in your mind, the pink has been rezoned to what?
I think it's 5 acre blocks, that
5
side.
acre blocks.
So at the time, it rezoned to 5 acre blocks.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? No? Thank you very much, Dallas.
Okay, so I'm Taylor Hall. I'm the Operations Manager of Valley Pack Cold Storage in Mooroopna, and today I'd like to present just regarding an opportunity we'd like considered for rezoning of, in the 2050 plan, 93 Excelsior Avenue, Mooroopna. It's a 78 hectare, one of the titles, 78 hectare site, and that is just west of Excelsior Avenue and north of the Midland Highway. Excuse me. The reason, initially, the reason we think it should be considered is the opportunity for larger blocks to be provided in Mooroopna, which currently are not not available. So there's nothing on our side of the river that's of a size that may attract people, in our opinion, to come out of Melbourne. So for our business, we've got 40 staff, and of those 40 staff, a growing number are people who move from Melbourne, especially those with the skills to work in import-export, which is our business. So of the 40 staff, the numbers are growing, and the skills we need are import-export based in Melbourne. The site is unique, in my opinion, with regards to Mooroopna. It's high ground, so that's not very common in Mooroopna, both north and south of the site. Mooroopna has some significant flooding challenges. And to the west, we raise into the higher ground that was traditionally used for agriculture, horticulture in the past. So this site was a vineyard initially, and that in itself is a big bonus. The site is bordered to the east by the future Shepparton bypass, so that will provide access both north and south from this site. So you'll have a direct access to the north via a river crossing, and then direct access onto the freeway to the south. The town water currently runs right past the front of the site along the Midland Highway, and that water provides town water to what is basically high-density residential use at Varraville and Acacia caravan parks, which are directly adjacent. These sites are directly to the west. Those two sites provide challenges to this 78-hectare site. Given its high-density residential use in that area, it limits the ability for horticultural or agricultural use of this particular site. So it's a sensitive site already. It's got an existing service station block on the highway frontage, which will form part of the Diamond interchange. The area is fairly densely populated currently, so there are a number of houses that have been subdivided off farmland directly beside this house to the north, south, and then with the future residential development to the east. Valleypack, the family business that I represent, own 180 hectares at this particular spot. So both north and south of the freeway, of the Midland Highway, and west of the new bypass is currently in Valleypack's ownership. And yeah, that's about 180 hectares. Our cool store and logistics site is also based there, which is on the, I'd say many of you might recognise the site to the south of the Midland Highway. And as I said before, we employ 40 staff, and we spend about $3 million a year on wages there. So it's quite a bit of money for Mooroopna, and money that feeds into the Mooroopna economy. And it's something that we believe will grow into the future, and we require people to move to the area with the skill set that we need to grow our business going forward. And discussions with people that I had a job interview yesterday with someone moving out of Romsey. If they're going to move to Shepparton, there's no point moving to Shepparton for a 400 square metre block, and that currently is what's being offered in Mooroopna, and for 400 to 600 square metre blocks. That's not something you want to move out of Melbourne for. It's not attractive. Socioeconomically, it doesn't provide a great outcome for the township of Mooroopna.
One more minute, thanks,
Thank you.
Taylor.
So over the last 20 years, my personal opinion is Mooroopna has suffered from a lack of land being opened, and what has been opened has been very small blocks. Doesn't do a great justice for the town. We can see that with the school situation, both primary school and secondary schools, results deteriorating. And we can see the alternative to that in Toolamba, for example, where large blocks have been offered. We've seen a significant improvement, education outcomes at the school, and a really great community. And Mooroopna, in my opinion, has missed out on that through a lack of suitable land and a lack of larger blocks, which will attract the right people to move to our area. Yeah, that's all I've got, basically.
Thank you very much, Taylor. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Summer?
Hi.
Amazing, really clear points.
Fern, could you just speak into your microphone? Sorry.
Thank you for that. Very clear points that made a lot of sense. I'm just wondering, in regards to attracting people from Melbourne, what size blocks you would envision would be appropriate?
Sorry, I did miss that point. Gary reminded me. So I believe, in my opinion, blocks are up to a hectare in size. So between 4,000 square metres up to 10,000 square metres. I believe that blocks that size provide a huge economic impact to the region. Everyone with a block like that buys a ride-on lawnmower, they buy equipment from town, they're economic drivers, large blocks. You need tools, you spend a lot of money, you take a lot of pride in your things when you have a block like that, and yeah, all of that money ends up in the town.
Thanks, Taylor. Councillor Dobson?
Thank you, Mayor. Taylor, thanks for your presentation.
Nice, thank you.
I've got on my screen here your actual block, 78 hectares. Can you get the pointer for me? And just on the big map there, tell me in relation to the rest of Mooroopna where we are? I'm finding it difficult just to pick up.
So we've got this is the main Ardmona drain in the lowest spot of the land, and then the block here is actually from Excelsior Avenue, right up there, across there.
That's it there, yeah, okay, got it.
Just like that.
And that's a drainage, a natural drainage
It's
course on that bottom corner there.
That's right, that's the Ardmona drain.
Yep.
And it's a bit of a weird spot there because the Ardmona drain goes through the bottom south-eastern corner. But at the same time, you've got the highest land directly adjacent to it with the lower 6-4 channel, which runs down to Kumboona, runs through the highest land.
Thanks.
And that's only on easement.
Yep, thanks, mate.
No worries.
Thank you. As that says, we are representing 805 Archer Road and 220 River Road. Our submission is really quite simple in that it's, we appreciate that the Kyala Central Precinct has been included in the strategy. We think the strategy says all the right things about growth. But really what we're saying is that the area should be defined as a precinct in and of itself, just so that the structure planning for the area can happen in an orderly fashion and in a timely fashion. We appreciate that there is existing areas of zoned urban growth land at the moment. My professional view is that is very fragmented land, and from a long-term housing supply perspective, where you've got lots of fragmented land holdings, it can be difficult and take a long time to get a cohesive plan with practical land supply happening effectively. So from a growth strategy point of view, where you've got a document that is quite aspirational in its vision for Shepparton and Mooroopna, my professional view is that it's better to have more defined land supply for the long-term future of those precinct areas. So the Kyala Central Precinct is an area that I think is well suited to future urban growth. It's relatively flat, it's well connected to the surrounding area, it's contiguous with zoned areas that are either an investigation area at the moment or a future urban growth zone, and it's well connected to things like community facilities and things like that. So I think that the Kyala Central Primary School also provides a really good baseline piece of infrastructure that allows the structure planning process to evolve naturally out of something that's already there, and it would integrate well with the existing low density areas to the east there. So effectively, really that's what we're saying, is that the strategy really just needs to, I suppose, formally recognise the area between Archer Road, River Road, Kyala Central Road and Mitchell Road as a future precinct, so that it at least has the same status and standing as the other long-term future residential areas that the strategy identifies. Is there anything else that needs to be covered? So, yeah, I beat the 5-minute clock, so...
That's okay.
Was there any questions?
Any questions, councillors? No? Anything else to add? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in this morning.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
So, good morning, Mayor Kim O'Keefe and Deputy Mayor Rob Priestley, Councillor Seema Abdullah, Councillor Anthony Brophy, Councillor Jeff Dobson, Councillor Greg James, Councillor Shane Sarley, Councillor Sam Spinks, Councillor Fern Summer, and Chief Executive Peter Harriott, and of course the council staff. Thank you very much for having us here today. I'd also like to acknowledge before I start and thank the former and also those current councillors that are still holding their positions, who in August 2020 delayed the adoption of the 2050 Regional Growth Plan to allow for more community consultation. As a family, we welcomed this announcement as we felt there were pieces that were missing in the plan, particularly a residential investigation into the land east of Doyles Road, which is where we reside, which is 290 New Dookie Road, Granville. To us, there was no consideration to this piece of land being zoned to residential. Also in the plan, there wasn't much consideration to the Greater Shepparton Secondary College and the 3,000 expected students that will soon be at that school, and then the growth of the residential housing that will accommodate those families around that school. I'd like to say before I go into the thing, I feel like I was a little bit disappointed early on. This was given a 6-month consultation period, but as we all know how small Shepparton can be, so word gets around really quickly about what's being said. I won't give any names or business names, but a staff member of your planning team on speaking to, during a phone conversation, actually said to somebody, "I don't know why you're bothering, nothing is going to change." This was also heard in a street conversation with one of the directors of a very well-known residential development organisation in the community, said exactly the same thing. "I don't know why you're all bothering, because nothing is going to change." Setting that aside, I must say this is quite intimidating standing here, because we'll admit we're not experts in planning and probably might get some of the information wrong. To just give you a bit of an outline of our land, which is at 290 New Dookie Road, we have, we have 25 acres, which originally was owned by the Anderson family, and at that time there was 2 lots of 25 acres and a little bit more. Brian's family were orchardists, and in the 70s, SPC had a buyback program where families were able to sell they were given an amount of money if they would pull their trees out because of the abundance of fruit, and this came from a program from the SPC. This was done by Brian's family, and over a period of time, Colin continued to work the land and with a variety of different produce and wheat. After that, the land, he then felt that it was probably not really viable, and they split the land between 288 and 290 New Dookie Road, both 25 acres, and at that time sold most of the water rights. So now this land, because is not really viable to support a family in agriculture, and plus due to the previous fragmentation of the land in this area, our property is not fit really for sustainable agricultural purpose, as it's being rezoned residential purposes. Mainly I'm talking about New Dookie Road. This is just a quick view from our place across to Dobson Estate, and again back the other way from Dobson Estate to ours. So in between both the Dobson Estate area and our house, there's just land that's really probably a bit of a fire risk at times. In Dobson Estate, as we know, there's about 140 houses, and we all know that continues to have some issues in that land in regards to, I know that they've complained about there's no walking tracks, and there's some issues with, it probably should have a retardation basin, and all these could be addressed if it would be considered to our land to be changed to residential. Already available in New Dookie Road is what you can see there, water access, gas, electricity, and there's some sewage connection points that are very close to our land and the NBN. So there's not a huge lot of costs.
1 more minute, thanks, Chris.
Thank you. So I guess this is just a quick view of how far we are to everything. And we just can't understand why this land is not being considered as being residential, and why an investigation hasn't taken place. I mean, you've probably all got this report, so you can, my submission, so you can actually read it. So we're asking a residential investigation to take place in our area, and then I guess once that's done, that will give us the answers we need. I'd just like to thank you all for listening to our submission, and I hope all the councillors will consider our submission here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Do we have any questions, councillors? Councillor Brophy?
Mine's more of a statement for you, Christine, and that is I am glad that you have bothered.
Thank you.
Yes.
And for many of us, this is new. So we may not have, previous ones may have seen it, previous officers, etc., but for many of us, this is new. So
Thank you, Councillor Brophy.
Any other questions, councillors? And I'd like to comment too, Christine, we're here because we haven't made any decisions as yet. We still have a long way to go on this plan. We're going to have to obviously keep moving with it. It's been a moving beast since I've been on council, and there's been a lot of attention to it, and we needed to continue to do that. So please don't think your time is wasted, because it absolutely is not.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure
Mayor.
to see you today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thanks again for the opportunity to present to you about the 2050 strategy plan. As you know, I'm Jane Macy, a Principal Town Planner with Spire. This is Casey Collins, an Associate Planner with Spire. So we're here today at this session to represent our company, Spire, and also some of our clients. We've made one presentation to talk through a couple of common themes that we have through ourselves and our clients. So if you could bear with us through a short presentation, and then we can talk about the specific client needs and respond to any questions then, if that's appropriate. We have, I think, 3 time slots booked for now. So a little bit about Spire. Most of you will be familiar with our company. It's been around for about 30 years, 20 years in Shepparton. We offer a range of professions who service the property and infrastructure market, so we often work on projects right from inception, so from this right through to bricks and mortar on the ground. So with our offices across regional Victoria in Shepparton and Bendigo, recently opened an office in Ballarat, Geelong, Melbourne, Albury and Canberra, we do have a really good grip on what's happening in the regions in Victoria. As I said there, we've got 250 staff over those, so we have a good understanding of the development process. So we've had a lot of, as you're aware, we've had a lot of involvement with planning and development in Shepparton. We've worked on a number of growth corridors back in 2000 or 2003 when they were implemented through Amendment C11 into the planning scheme, the North and South growth corridors. We work closely with Council on the 2030 strategy plan, and we've also helped development of residential estates, those ones listed there, come to fruition. Some of those are completed, some of them are nearing completion. And we've also been closely involved, whether it's through clients or making submissions to council about various strategies over the 20 years that we've been here.
So, like council, Spire is very passionate about the orderly planning of Shepparton and the Mooroopna area, and therefore we commend council for the preparation of the 2050 growth plan. Particularly given state policy requires us to plan for more than a 15-year supply of land. Spire has undertaken a ground truthing exercise with some of the local developers and found much of the existing zone land identified in the growth plan has already been taken up or is not available for development. 2020 saw unprecedented lot sales, with many of the existing estates expected to be sold out in the next 1 to 2 years. One example of this is the Seven Creeks estate, where they've sold the next 2 stages before they've even designed and constructed the lots. We're expecting that these lot sales remain high, with many people remaining within regional locations or looking to move to regional locations. In the past, there's been as many as 14 growth fronts in Shepparton and Mooroopna area, and Spire is concerned that there is going to be as few as 3 to 4 in the next 1 to 2 years, with many of those estates selling out. There appears to be some discrepancies between the growth plan and the supply review report. One example of this is the North East Growth Corridor, where the Land Supply Review report identified that it's estimated to provide 870 lots, whereas the growth plan indicates approximately 1,500 lots to be provided. So we're just looking for council to, I guess, make those refinements and improvements to the plan. What we might do is actually leave the next couple of slides for you guys to absorb. I'm sure you'll get a hard copy of them as well, but I guess these next 2 plans just identify where much of the land has already been taken up and the very limited supply that actually is in the north of Shepparton, and the next one is the...
Casey, can I just ask, are they standard size blocks? There's bigger blocks out there as well, isn't there? Are they standard size? At the vines? At the vines?
Yeah, they're standard size.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably average about 800 square metres in size. So much of the South Grove corridors are already been taken up. And many of the investigation areas will take quite some time, I guess, to be made available because they're subject to things like flooding and stuff. So I guess what Spire is saying is we're concerned about the supply in the short term, not the longer term. We think the North East and the South East Growth Corridor got potential to provide for that 15 plus year supply, but in the next couple of years, a lot of those estates are going to be sold out, and where can you purchase a lot? So this one, Jo?
So that just leading on from Casey there, the timelines for the planning process are critical to realise the filling of that gap. So as we have a table here later which will just show that in a couple of years' time most of the existing growth fronts will be completed, and we need to then look at the timelines that we need to work from to really fill that gap between a 2-year time frame and a 5-year time frame, when some of the other identified growth corridors such as the southeast might come onto the market. It's the process that we work through is taking an extraordinarily lengthy time to get a block on the market, basically, for somebody to purchase and build their home. And that's what our concern is. The time that it takes through the bureaucratic process that we need to work through is not meeting the timelines where the land supply will be needed in the next 2 to 5 years. So that's the critical thing that is of concern to us about the 2050 strategy. So some of the solutions are to bring forward some of those areas for investigation, and I know in Council's current budget there was some money allocated for some of those investigations, some flood studies and some traffic studies and some drainage studies. We need to bring those forward and expedite those assessments to be done in a very coordinated manner, so all the different studies speak the same language and speak to each other to really be able to put those development areas on the market sooner. We are encouraging council to work with developers to find land that's less constrained than some. We know from our work here over the many years that there's some flooding constraints in Shepparton. There's also a number of other environmental constraints which make it just that little bit harder to put some development parcels out on the market. So work with developers, find some land that has few environmental and servicing constraints, generally properties that are in 1 or 2 ownerships and with landowners that are ready to develop, can really tick that box for development opportunities to come forward.
Yeah, so what we've done is just put a table together of the residential estates in the Shepparton, mainly Shepparton, but also Mooroopna area. And what we have done is worked with one of our local developers, with the local developers, just to formulate when they're likely to sell out their lots. So there's probably approximately 13 estates there, with most of them expected to sell out within less than 1 year, and a couple of them up to 1 to 2 years. So in 2 years' time, we're concerned about if you want to go buy a block, where can you buy a block of land? And there is a couple of estates, I guess, coming onto the market in the near future, but we feel that the reason why having all these estates available is given people opportunities options on where they can purchase. So we might just click on to the next
Sorry,
one.
before you do, Casey, Rob here, could you just clarify the difference between the 0 and the X? What's the Grove versus Grammar Gardens?
Oh, the X is just like the...
Oh, the Grove. Oh, sorry, I think the Grove's actually sold out, I believe.
So these, and Grammar Gardens is sold out also, or?
The X just, it's probably not a very good symbol. The X is really just to mark which category it falls into. So whether it's less than a year or 1 to 2 years.
So the Grove is already sold out, and Grammar Gardens will sell out this year.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, this first column of either sold or will sell out within the next 12 months. The second column, 12 months to 24 months.
So I guess I was just touching on the benefits of multiple growth fronts. There's many benefits, including a competitive housing market, diversity and choice in product, opportunities for multiple investors into the local economy, and I think one of the most important things is housing affordability. Shepparton has been very lucky to remain relatively low in their lot prices in comparison to many other regional locations. And that's not like construction costs continue to go up for the developers, but because we've had the options available in the area, we've been able to maintain a relatively low lot price. But I can only see in the short term that these prices will go up because there's such a high demand for those lots. Okay, so where is suitable land? Spire has been speaking to developers, clients, etc. And one of the, I guess, options we've been working through is the former Radio Australia land. Now, the other ones also include some land near Emerald Bank and some land out near Shep East. And we believe these properties represent a viable residential development option and for the following reasons. They're generally in one ownership and ready to develop. Already removed from intensive farming, not subject to flooding, can be easily serviced. They are of a scale which provide unique opportunity for a master plan community, the Radio Australia site in particular, has ready access to established arterial road network and is adjacent to existing residential land. Given the timeframes to rezone and develop land, these sites should be identified in the shorter term to accommodate the shortage of residential land in the near future. And if you just want to flick over to the next one, Jane. I just wanted to discuss the Emerald Bank site, who we're working with. So Morco own a portion of the site, mainly to the western, where that star is located. That land is has previously been used for tourism purposes, a heritage farm. That use ceased a couple of years ago, and we've been working with that landowner for the potential to actually expand the existing residential land to the south, further north, to increase the number of lot yields, the number of lots we can achieve on that site. So this is a good opportunity. Whilst it's not a large site, it's a good infill site that can come on board fairly quickly in the short term.
And just looking in terms of providing that multiple growth fronts, this site out adjacent to the township of Shepparton East provides a really great opportunity to provide a different sort of housing product. It too is in one land ownership, it's got relatively few constraints, and the owner's ready to look to the next step for that property. So whilst this area sits just a little bit to the side of the regional growth plan, we're asking council to look at these opportunities that can also be provided to meet that short-term gap in the housing market.
Jane, what size is that parcel there?
That would be, I think it will yield about 40 lots of around about 1,000 to 1,200 square metres. So the landowner here is actually looking to potentially develop the frontage of the Midland Highway with some commercial uses. and then provide some open space as a buffer and then some residential allotments towards the rear, tying in where possible to the existing township. So Shepparton East hasn't had a particular study done focusing on it similar to the one of Toolamba, so there could be an opportunity to undertake a focus study for the township there. So that concludes the formal part of our presentation. We have whizzed through a lot, but you've all received a copy of our submission and you'll have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, which covers things in a little bit more detail, but conscious of the timelines, and also we'd welcome any questions or any discussion on any of the points raised.
Okay, Councillor Dobson.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you again. I'm interested in your going back to the number of blocks available on the short term. Do you have ongoing meetings with agents and a multitude of developers to get this information? Tell us how you get your information.
Exactly that way, Councillor Dobson. So we work with multiple developers, and even if they're not our immediate clients, we still have relationships with a lot of them. We talk to servicing authorities and they tell us what they know about the market. Real estate agents are ringing us up at the moment saying, please give us something to sell. They've pretty much sold all that they can sell, or got on the market what they can sell. So it's regular conversations with the industry, really. And look, they're not necessarily formal meetings, but they're just part of our ground truthing that we do. So.
And one other question, your interaction with our council planning people, what's that? Do you...
No, so we probably daily, I mean, they can probably vouch for that. We talk regularly to council planners and have a really great working relationship with the officers. So,
do you see conflict between your assessments and the council officers' assessments?
No, not necessarily. That some of them perhaps come from different perspectives. And as we said, I think that 2050 does really cater for that 15-year supply at least. It's just that there's a gap between year 2 and year 5.
Yep.
So I suppose in some ways we're perhaps 3 years in the cycle behind, so we just need to speed things up a little bit to catch up. That's really where we see the issues with this at the moment.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Councillor Abdullah.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Very interesting presentation. And in regards to the identifications that has been done through this presentation, I'm interested in your views about Shepparton East growth corridor that you have identified and said that it can provide 40 lots roughly. So with your experience, what are your comments regarding the agriculture land use study and the assessment that this is a prime agricultural land? How does that compare with your recommendation of using Shep East as a corridor, growth corridor for the short term?
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Abdullah. That's a good question. So the Shepparton East land that is up there is adjacent to the township. Oops. So it sits a little bit away from the Shepparton East area that has probably come to your attention via a few presentations this morning. So this land is quite distinctly separated from that. But nevertheless, it raises some similar issues in terms of agricultural land. So this land hasn't been used for intensive agriculture for quite some time. Other land around it is being used for intensive ag and will probably continue to be being used for that way. So given it abuts an existing township and that there is a demand for some larger lots outside the main urban fabric of Shepparton and Mooroopna, we just see this site as providing a good opportunity. So it does sit distinctly different to the other Shepparton East corridor, which we haven't looked into or made any particular comments in this submission today. So,
thank you very much. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Priestley.
Thanks for the presentation, Jane. Fantastic. Could you pass comment, Spire's a big organisation now with, and a great Shepparton success story, might I add,
thank you.
With offices in other regional centres. What is it that we can be doing better to facilitate the prosperous growth of the region in terms of planning and development?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thanks. I think with our other centres being a little bit closer to Melbourne, they are attracting a lot more growth that will attract that commuter traveller. Shepparton just being a little bit further away is probably not there yet, but when the rail services come, it will be. So I think we need to continue that dialogue and perhaps reintroduce the forums that we had with the development industry and really strengthen that again, and perhaps a greater reliance on the skills that council's got in-house in terms of delivering some of these projects rather than looking to outsource to someone like the VPA. So I think there's a lot of, obviously Spire's got a great deal of knowledge. There's a lot of local knowledge from engineering planning in other organisations within the region that could be drawn into to bring forward some of these, whether it's site identification through to the planning scheme amendment through to detailed design. There's a lot of local knowledge that could be brought in through collaborative partnerships with the council. Obviously working closely with state government, with DELP in terms of the timelines to get the minister to sign off things is good as well, and developing those relationships. So there's a lot of things that can be done in terms of expediting some of these to bring them out onto the ground.
So Jane, I've just got a question as well. So in regard to agricultural land, what do you consider a reasonable time frame where it's been retired for quite some time? We've had some submitters come in where the land hasn't been used for almost 20 years, and yet we're trying to protect, agricultural land. What do you consider a reasonable time frame where that decision may change? Sorry, I know it's a big one.
That's a great question, and if I had lots of time, we could deliberate that all day.
Yeah.
Look, I've worked with a lot of different farmers and farming properties, and I think they're all quite uniquely different.
Yeah.
And I know that might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but I think, you can't look at a piece of land in isolation. You need to look at its surrounding context. You really do need to have a look at the soil types and the infrastructure that could be there to support the farming, whether it's being used for a long time or not. I mean, 20 years is a long time, and it's probably would take some time to bring it back to being a viable farm, if it ever could be, because 20 years is probably lending itself to be smaller rather than a larger piece of land. But I think in looking at all of that, it really needs to be looked at not in isolation to that, but what's around it and what is compatible with that. To look at it, I mean, 20 years is a lengthy time, but for some farms who have been farmed to death almost, 18 months might be enough because the soil can't be rejuvenated or there's not the infrastructure around it to support it. So each bit of land will be different, and it depends on what the agricultural uses were too, about how intensively it's been farmed. So,
thank you for that. Any other questions, Sam?
Thank you very much for your presentation. This is a little bit aside, and so I understand that because it's not necessarily strictly to do with your submission, you just may not have a comment on it. But at the start you mentioned that Spire had been involved in the housing strategy, and considering we have our affordable housing strategy and we're looking at, I know we're talking about growth and we're talking about development, and from a planning perspective, I just wonder if you have any comment or thoughts on the strategy as it stands in relation to those sort of strategies that we have available and we're thinking about.
Yeah, no, we have looked at the, Casey and I and one of our colleagues in Melbourne did have a good look at the affordable housing strategy, and obviously there's some synergies between this and housing affordability strategy. One, as Casey touched on in the presentation, having multiple options for land choice does help with affordability. But I think the affordability strategy is quite specific in what it wants to achieve in a lot more detail. This 2050 strategy as an overarching document could facilitate those outcomes, but this is probably more of an overarching document, and we probably haven't got into the nitty-gritties of housing affordability in our submission today, but more than happy to have those conversations because it's a really critical issue, particularly if land is short. It's supply and demand, market forces. The price will go up if there's not the supply.
Yep.
And that's becoming, COVID's really shown that housing affordability is a really critical issue, particularly in the regions at the moment. So,
brilliant, thank you.
Yep.
There's just one thing I have leading on from that too, Jane. Obviously post-COVID now and COVID recovery and it being acknowledged that regional Victoria is going to have an increase, we hope, of interest and development and all that. I suppose that's something that at this point of time within our strategy we haven't had the time or the consideration. How do you feel that's going to impact on this particular plan?
I think, well, as we touched on, this lot sales in 2020 were unprecedented. And I think that that's not only people looking to move to a regional centre, but it's also people staying. And that's really key as well, because it's retaining workforce population, it's encouraging job creation and employment opportunities. So I think that that will continue. And that's where Shepparton's probably at a critical point with all these great infrastructure projects coming on board, that we can really capture that. And in my previous submission, I talked about encouraging growth and stimulating those opportunities. So I think we can really, really take advantage of what's happened with COVID. As we were just talking before, a lot of outside people have seen the dream that we live up here and are coming to also experiencing that, which just further exacerbates the reason to bring some of these projects forward so we can offer a choice of housing opportunities for people moving here.
And hence where you've highlighted that 2 to 5 year urgency.
That's right,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, I agree with that.
Yep. So hopefully the COVID trend continues, not the pandemic, but the interest in the regional areas. So, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Anything else to add?
No, as we've always said, we're just down the road and quite happy to talk to people at any time about any of these issues. So we do enjoy a really good working relationship with council, we always have. So our door's always open for these discussions.
Thank you very much,
Yep. Thanks for the
appreciate
opportunity.
it, thank you.
Yep.
Well, thank you for inviting us along and listening to our submission. Basically, we're 3 Raftery Road landholders on the west side of Raftery Road. In our submission, we actually have 4 owners, Rex Piastri, but I think he's working with another group, so we're representing 3 owners, myself, Roy Hill, Joy Thompson and Steve O'Donoghue. Basically, we're pretty simple in our submission. Being on the west side of Raftery Road, there is some land there which is similar to the land probably on the east side, which has a designation of rural residential, I think, if I'm correct. On our side, or the west side, there is no designation for the land which is a similar height and in a similar maybe flood zone, I'm not sure. There's no designation on the west side of Raftery Road for a similar block of land. Our question is, why isn't there a designation for that, considering that it's similar to the land on the east side? Obviously, we think that needs to be changed on our side to rural residential or something that can be developed in the future, considering the fact that the east side will possibly be developed in the future with services and stuff like that. So I'm sure there'll be services in that area at some stage, meaning power, sewerage, gas, electricity and roads, whatever. So basically that's our presentation. The question is will we be considered for a rural residential zoning or something similar on the west side of Raftery Road, which affects the 3 properties that we own?
So thank you, Roy, and yes, we are considering all presentations today, so certainly giving it a lot of in-depth consideration, and we appreciate the stakeholders, landowners coming in to give us more information so that we can make those, those informed decisions. So we really appreciate you coming in. It is making a difference, I assure you of that, and it's certainly opening the questions up, particularly to our new councillors, which is such an important time during this process. So appreciate you coming in, and if there's any other questions, we can certainly go to that. If not, thank you again for coming in. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Rob's just got a quick question.
Just a quick question, Roy. The three properties plus, I think you mentioned Rex Piastri.
Yep.
What would be the total area of the four properties if that was combined, or three?
Okay, just running through, Rex has 2 hectares, Joy has 4.7 hectares, Roy Hill has 6.3, and Steve O'Donoghue has 9.5 hectares. So there's a considerable amount of land there that probably could be available for development.
Okay. No more questions?
Yeah,
Was there something else to add?
20 hectares. Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, George.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much, councillors, for the opportunity to present to you today. Urbis acts on behalf of the landowner group, who collectively owns 50 and 60 River Road West and 7505 Goulburn Valley Highway, Kiala. My name is Eleni Rissos, and I'm a director in the Urbis planning team. And with me today, hopefully you can see him, is Jack Gringlas, who's representing the landowner group. We were intending on having a PowerPoint presentation, which I had provided to council, but I'm assuming that that's not able to be put up on the screen, or is that something that can come up?
Are we putting that up?
You can share your screen if you've got it there.
Sure.
Technology.
One moment, apologies.
Sure.
Windy,
There we go. Is that coming up?
Not yet.
Right. It says that I'm able to share the screen. Is anybody able to see that?
Yes. Yep. Yes. Michael, can you start the time from now? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, councillors. So the land holdings owned by my client, being 50 and 60 River Road West and 7505 Goulburn Valley Highway in Kiala, are represented in red in the screen, as we can see here. Land holdings comprise an area of approximately 140 hectares, situated 6 kilometres southwest of central Shepparton. The overriding purpose of this presentation to you today is to reinforce my client's commitment to the region and the land, and its broad support for the adoption and implementation of the growth plan. The land is currently zoned rural living, with an 8 hectare minimum subdivision lot size in the schedule to the zone. We note that of the 140 hectares, approximately 37 is within the urban floodway zone, leaving approximately 103 hectares developable. And you can see on the plan to the right of the screen, the area in blue is the area affected by the urban floodway zone, and the area highlighted in the pinkish orange is the land that is zoned and developable. The land has been recognised by Council as being of strategic importance, having already been identified as an investigation area, specifically Investigation Area 2 in the Strategic Planning and Local Policy currently within the Greater Shepparton Planning Scheme. The current growth plan proposed by Council and the VPA continues to recognise the strategic importance of the land and refers to it as the Kiala West Growth Corridor. My client's land holdings comprise approximately 40% of this overall growth corridor. Now, we do know that there appears to be a difference in the boundary of the land known as Investigation Area 2 and the land identified as the growth corridor in the growth plan. This boundary change does not appear to affect my client's land, but is worth mentioning. And I might highlight that the blue outline that you see here is the outline of the investigation area currently within the scheme. And the growth plan effectively seeks to remove, this southern portion and this northern portion. But we can't seem to plot it because we don't have those particular base details. Now, the growth plan identifies that the Kiala West Growth Corridor is to provide approximately 800 dwellings and that standard residential densities will be considered under certain conditions. To this end, we understand that Council and the VPA have made certain reasonable assumptions regarding the infrastructure requirements to enable the proposed 800 lots. And while the growth plan advises that standard densities will most likely be supported in the southern end of the precinct, we see no reason why standard densities can't be applied for in the entire corridor if good urban design principles are adopted. This, we feel, would be a more sustainable and effective use of the land. My client's commitment to delivering future residential development in this location was evidenced by the combined planning scheme amendment and subdivision process initiated in 2014. Now, while that particular proposal did not progress, since this time, they have been considering the most suitable outcome for the land and remain committed to delivering a high-quality residential outcome which will provide a contemporary model of dwelling diversity for the region. It is recognised that the site is affected by flooding, bushfire and servicing constraints. Relevant consultants have been engaged to undertake these preliminary investigations and advise on how these matters can be appropriately addressed in future development scenarios. These investigations have commenced, and as we continue to work through these technical aspects, there is a commitment to a transparent and open process with Council and the authorities. We note that to that end, positive meetings have occurred at the end of 2020 with the catchment management authorities and with Council. And as these investigations continue, we will update those authorities with the findings. It is in this light that it is put that the corridor is advanced in its planning and recognition of the ability for the land to be planned for and developed ahead of the medium-term timeframe. The growth plan itself identifies a medium-time, 5 to 10-year timing for the Kiala West growth corridor. We say that this ought be amended to a short-term, 1 to 5-year timeframe. Given the major landowners' commitment to progressing with the required process and the need for more housing in the region, current strategic planning processes provide that should this growth plan be adopted by Council and incorporated into the scheme, which would also include the rezoning of the land from rural living to an urban growth zone, a precinct structure plan process would then commence to consider the details for the corridor's future development. Once the precinct structure plan is itself then incorporated into the Greater Shepparton planning scheme, only then can permit applications be considered by Council. Thank you. This in itself is a process that can take in the order of 5 years. So if commenced within 1 to 5 years, works on the ground to provide this much needed housing would reasonably occur in no less than 7 to 8 years. All this being said, we appreciate the opportunity to provide written and verbal submissions to the draft Shepparton and Mooroopna 2050 Regional City Growth Plan, and trust that these submissions will be carefully considered as part of the ongoing strategic planning for the region, and in particular, reinforcing the value of this land as a strong and positive short-term opportunity for residential growth. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any queries that you may have.
Thank you very much, Eleni. Councillors, do we have any questions? No questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for presenting today. And
thank you kindly.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
The reason I'm back today, this afternoon, is in relation to the Svetkopolis family land, which is at 50 Grahamvale Road. The submission also relates largely to the land east of Shepparton, the land east of Doyles Road and Grahamvale Road there, basically, well, from Benalla Road through to Grahamvale Primary School generally, but the Svetkopolis family land sits right up the north end of that, and if you could imagine going down Doyles Road, Grahamvale Road towards the primary school, as the road doglegs goes across the railway line, if you actually deviate a little bit to the right and went straight on, that's the land there that sits in behind the railway line, and it's right next to the railway line on both sides, the Dookie branch line and the Shepparton line on two sides, and right next to what was historically Linfield's heavy industrial, but now complete trucks have just moved into there, I think, or in the process of moving into there, so adjacent to that industrial use. So the basis of my submission that I think you've all got sort of harks back to the industrial land review that was carried out in 2011, and it forms the basis of what's in the planning scheme today. As far as industrial land goes, the land directly along the eastern side of Doyles Road, Benalla Road to Granvale Road, is currently recognised in the industrial framework plan as preferred industrial expansion. And this industrial land review from back in 2011 sort of it was a pretty comprehensive document, and it sets out a really good supply and demand analysis and a snapshot of industrial land at that time, and concludes that that land on the east side of Doyles Road should be recognised for future growth. That demand in East Shepparton is high and will continue to be high. At this time in 2011, there was an adequate supply for most industrial uses, although a desire for larger areas. And what's happened since then is that East Shepparton industrial area on the inside of the road is all filled out, and there's some really good quality development there. Syndicate Engineering, Aquatech, Ken Muston Service Centre, that area in there, that's all been developed since then. But the larger logistics and the larger enterprises that need a bigger footprint but not necessarily buildings or developments have more so catered for, they've found other opportunities throughout the municipality and taken advantage of the farming zone relaxed rules so that they can establish in farming areas. So the submission is that there's need for more industrial land in Shepparton, and that area east of Doyles Road is very close to the existing township, and it's right there. It's got good logistics. It's got main road access. We know there's we know there's Dobson's estate right in the middle of it, and that needs to be catered for, and some appropriate continuation of some lower density residential around that, and some appropriate buffers will see that developed out. I mean, there's land use conflicts in there now, and they'll continue. They are there with the current uses, and we know that farmers are continuing to farm there. But I was here at the stakeholder consultation 12 months ago, and the farmer said, you've got to do something with your land. Sure, they're farming, but you've got to do something. You can't let it go to rack and ruin. But whether it's sustainable or viable for the longer term is another question. And most of them are saying they'd rather be out. They've got those conflict issues. Some of the constraints, I'm sorry for moving so quickly in 6 minutes, some of the constraints that were identified in the 2050 for that area I've addressed in my submission, but it included, there was flooding in the area. Now, it's recognised that there's surface drainage issues there, but they can be resolved as part of development, and probably the legacy issues around Dobson's and others could even be improved with development through that area. We recognise that there's irrigation investment in that area, and farmers are still irrigating, but it's right at the end of the network.
One more minute.
Yep. So we know that there's 3 times more land in the Golden Murray Irrigation District than there is water. Any coordinated rationalisation, is going to help other farmers who are still looking for water. These properties are right at the end of the line, so there's perceivably easy rationalisation and rescinding of long spur lines that'll help the network. Doyles Road needs to be upgraded, we know that, but that can easily be catered for in design, and that's catered for down at River Road and so on. And the last point in there was that growth can be accommodated in the settlement boundary, but realistically, the 2050, it's the next 30 years. It should be providing opportunities for big sky thinking, to allow the municipality to continue to prosper, to have those opportunities over 30 years, not prescribing just exactly here and exactly here is the only place.
Okay, thank you
There
very
go.
much.
Just made it.
No, that's all right, Gary. It's fine. Thank you very much for that. Councillors, do we have any questions? No? All righty, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming back again, Gary.
Thanks.
Today's presentation will focus on the significant issue which is identified in our submission and accompanying our expert reports on Investigation Area 4. This issue is that the reports relied on by Council to determine the future land use of Investigation Area 4 as agricultural land are flawed. These flaws are set out in a detail in the expert reports annexed to our submission. The reliance on these flawed reports by Council has led to a decision to keep this area as agricultural land in the 2050 plan. For the reasons set out in our submission, these reports are incapable of being relied on by Council. In our submission, these flaws mean that Council has no proper basis for the determination of future land use in Investigation Area 4 set out in the 2050 plan.
In 2011, numerous submissions were provided as part of Amendment C93, which demonstrated how the land in Investigation Area 4 was well located to supply future residential development, particularly low-density residential development. This is clear from this picture. Submissions also noted that structural changes in agriculture and fruit-growing industry meant that orchards were no longer viable in this location. These submissions are extracted in the report for Amendment C93. I strongly encourage you to read them again. The draft industrial report prepared for Council in 2010 stated that ad hoc planning of industrial zones had created islands of residential and industrial land surrounded by contrasting zones. The draft industrial report encouraged Council to prepare structural plans to equally consider all land uses and interfaces with existing development. Amendment C93 was intended to properly resolve these issues in an integrated and coordinated manner.
Okay, it's been 9 years now. The structural plans have not been completed. The coordinated and comprehensive strategic investigations required by Amendment C93 have not been completed. Council has not looked at future land use in Investigation Area 4 in any integrated, balanced and transparent way.
Now, from the slide, you can see that Investigation Area 4 is near services including the future sole public secondary college in Shepparton and Mooroopna, near 108 hectares of existing low-density residential development in Dobson Estate, and transport connections and services. This is supported by a 2015 subdivision of part of Investigation Area 4 as part of Amendment C182. In the Council submission in support of this amendment, Council noted an increase in residential development in this area in close proximity to the Shepparton urban area will increase the number of people utilising existing services and facilities in the Dobson Estate area. This will make these facilities more financially viable and encourage new investment in town. In the 250 plan in its current form, Investigation Area 4 will be subject to a piecemeal planning scheme that effectively abandons Dobson Estate for the next 30 years. This is a situation the investigations required by Amendment C93 sought to prevent. In our submission, this situation has arisen because of Council's reliance on flawed reports.
Instead of abiding by the requirements of Amendment C3 to conduct a strategic, coordinated investigation into future land use in a policy-neutral manner, Council has instead prepared numerous ad hoc reports in Investigation Area 4. These include reports into flooding in the area prepared in 2017, industrial use prepared in 2019, and agricultural use prepared in 2020. As set out in our submission, we have obtained expert reports which have peer-reviewed the reports relied on by Council to support the determination of future land use in Investigation Area 4. These peer reviews have identified that these reports are flawed and cannot and should not be relied on by Council to determine future land use in this area. The key points are extracted on this slide.
Critically, the report of Rob Guest identifies that the Shepparton East Overland Flood Study significantly overstates the flooding in this area, and that the attributes of the land do not preclude the development of the area into urban or residential land. The report of David Crowder states that, from a planning perspective, insufficient studies have been conducted to conclude that Investigation Area 4 should be removed from the 250 plan. No comprehensive strategic assessment has been conducted, and that insufficient studies have been conducted to conclude that the area should be removed from future residential or industrial use in the 250 plan. The report of Ray Phillips concludes that the RMCG report into agricultural viability in this area does not attempt to conduct an independent assessment of where the area stands in relation to agricultural activity. These represent fundamental criticisms of the conclusions reached in each of the reports relied upon by Council to
to support the
Just
determination.
one more minute.
This is the point of our submission. Amendment C93 required strategic, integrated and comprehensive processes to be undertaken to strategically resolve land use issues in Investigation Area 4. Instead, ad hoc reports have been commissioned by Council. Each report is insufficient to satisfy the requirements of Amendment C93, which required integrated and coordinated investigations to resolve the existing issues. Each report is clearly flawed. Each report fails to provide a sufficient basis for the determination reached by Council for future land use for this area. Council must abide by its own planning scheme and conduct a comprehensive strategic assessment. This was the purpose and intention of the investigations required by Amendment C93. In the absence of the completion of these investigations, Council has no proper basis for the determination of future land use in Investigation Area 4 set in 2050. Given the issues set out above, the submission requires that the Council undertake the necessary conceptual and structural investigations into Investigation Area 4. These investigations were mandated by Amendment C3. Can I have another second?
Just finish that sentence, fine.
Okay. To fail to complete the required investigations would breach Council's own planning scheme. In these circumstances, Council has no proper basis to proceed in its current form without determining future land use in Investigation Area 4 in the 2050 plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I know it's hard to get it out, isn't it? Good job, you did well. Well done. I know. No, you did well. Do any councillors have any questions there? No? All right, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bezzy. Thanks, Suzanne.
Okay, feel a bit overawed there, a bit outnumbered, but
Yeah.
you can still get a bit nervous in these meetings, I think.
No, it's okay. It's all nice and relaxed today. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and probably more than refer to that, I have come up with a script that I'll probably keep to, and that PowerPoint is more, along with our original submission to the 2050 growth plan, that'll just be good reference for the council before their meeting next month. Okay, so I'm not just going to put a PowerPoint up and sort of read it parrot fashion there, if that's okay. So I'll get right into it. So good afternoon, Mayor O'Keefe, Deputy Mayor Priestley, all councillors and council executives. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding Metcash's submission to the Shepparton and Mooroopna 2050 Regional City Growth Plan. My name is Christopher Burke and I am the Regional Business Development Manager in Victoria, Tasmania, the ACT, New South Wales and Queensland for Metcash Property. I am based in Victoria. I've been involved with the development or in development in Shepparton North for more than 5 years. I'm a long-standing Metcash employee of almost 30 years. So I've been around a little bit with the independents. Well, the reason I wanted to speak to you today is quite simple. Metcash made a submission to the original council offer in response to the canvassing for views about the 2050 plan. We highlighted the critical need for a structure plan to underpin orderly planning in North Shepparton for the next 20 years or more. It was highly relevant for the 2050 Regional Growth Plan and unfortunately still remains so. The Victorian Planning Authority and Council responded in their draft document that a structure plan was to be scheduled for the next 5 years or so after the 2050 plan was adopted. We believe, and are not alone in this, that a structure plan should have been done already. Should be done now in case of it not being started as yet, and should definitely not be done at some unspecified time up to 5 years from the adoption of the 2050 plan. Those who agree with this position include independent planners, the experts who sat on Victorian planning panels C192 and C193 in North Shepparton, who explicitly called on the council to implement a structure plan in North Shepparton 3 years ago, and who more recently, last year, chaired the Minister's Advisory Committee to review planning issues in North Shepparton. So we are calling for you to include in your final version of the 2050 plan that an immediate action for council is to implement a structure plan for North Shepparton. The arguments for this structure plan are fundamental to orderly planning. Your council conducts them all year round in your council area, South Shepparton, East Shepparton, all over, but not in North Shepparton, where there has been 5 years of planning uncertainty and dispute. I call on you to get this done, put the results of it into practice and get North Shepparton moving on sure and sustainable planning grounds. There have been all sorts of strategies and similar done by council, but the key foundation is still missing today and is not replaced by these other strategies. Urban design frameworks, etc., they should all build on a structure plan. It will be window dressing to attach a structure plan after all the piecemeal planning has occurred. The state government sets out many reasons why a structure plan is vital to underpin planning, and just about all this, there's more than a page long, is relevant to North Shepparton. And I can make that document available, but it's in the Planning Vic website, Planning Practice Note 58, dated September 2018. The reluctance to perform this basic planning duty does not reflect well on planning for North Shepparton. Metcash's interest is a major landholder in North Shepparton. Although the company is in the process of divesting the land to an independent and experienced developer, Metcash does not operate the Fairley supermarket. It is owned and operated by a family business, which Metcash supplies to. And I've stepped out in the PowerPoint. That is a difference between Metcash as a large supermarket chain and the Coles and Woolworths and Aldi. The last council was advised that Metcash owned the Fairley's business and was against development of the Hawkins Street site. We totally refute this inaccuracy. We want the Fairley site sold and developed to deliver a much more modern Fairley supermarket and a second major supermarket on the Fairley's land. This will be protracted without a structure plan that delivers the best planning outcomes for Shepparton North. With a number of new faces at council now, we hope that you, as carriers of future vision, will now reimagine Metcash's support of a twin supermarket solution for the Fairley site, plus all the other 40 or so specialty stores. Get a structure plan started as soon as possible to provide general certainty from Pine Road to Radio Australia site as of now until 2050. There have been numerous ad hoc developments such as KFC and the CFA projects which needed to be factored in, but the sooner the structure plan gets underway, the better the outcome for Shepparton, investment, jobs and general planning. Who is against orderly planning? Proper planning as required by the state government and the VPA planning panel experts. As it stands now, there is a gaping hole in the 2050 City Growth Plan. North Shepparton does not have the fundamentals covered. It should. A failure to plan is a plan to fail. Please include the need for an immediate structure plan as part of your 2050 Regional Growth Plan. Why not start it now, even before the growth plan swings into action? May I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you today, your time in listening and hopefully understanding what we believe is required to properly and vitally complete your planning.
Thank you.
As I say,
we're on.
I'd just like to...
Sorry, go on. We're just on, on time, but that's right. What were you finishing up with there?
No, that's it. I'll finish it up there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Brophy?
Thanks, Chris. Just a quick question. Why, can I ask, why a twin supermarket and not just a bigger IGA?
So the size of the land, actually, from a development point of view, has to be a sustainable development. So for a developer to pick that land up for the size of it, it needs to develop quite a bit of the land. And the two supermarkets on the Fairley's land actually works from a sustainable point of view, from a development point of view. So that's rather than just a big IGA there. That's going to happen at some stage, but you know we can't really offload the land until we get the developer has certainty that he can do the twin supermarkets on the Fairley site. There's not a third full-line supermarket in Shepparton North.
Okay, any other questions? No? Thank you very much for that presentation today.
Yes, welcome to all the councillors, new and old. I make a point that councillors will need to fully understand the complexities and the errors in the 2050 growth plan. I have 7 issues of concern for councillors to consider, of which you can respond to myself in your allotted question time. Why is council officers withholding requested and required documents to properly consult? Council must provide the explanation why council officers have not provided access to all documents that were requested by myself, which I know form part of the consultation process. How can the council adopt the 2050 growth plan when itself has not been completed as required? Some of the information is factually wrong. This will give readers a biased and misleading view of the growth plan. Why has council not provided a full list of reference and background information documents used in the 2050 growth plan? For transparency purposes, council is obligated to provide the list of reference documents used for the growth plan. In complying with the policies, council must, for the purpose of transparency, release the VPA's terms of reference, which sets out the method in which council will conduct community consultation with the VPA. Has council complied with all its adopted council policies? Council has an obligation to comply with the relevant laws and statute. The question is, has the CEO informed councillors of their responsibilities to ensure compliance with all the relevant laws? Why has the responsibility being placed on the Greater Shepparton City councillors to adopt the 2050 growth plan if they have not been provided the reference and background documents that they require? I bring to your attention a plan. This is the plan of Vic Roads that shows a Shepparton alternative upgrade. These plans show the road to be a 4-lane road and a 4-lane bridge over the Groenville railway line. Can council confirm that these are the plans for the upgrade? If council cannot answer this question today, then councillors have not been properly briefed regarding this consultation. How can any councillor understand what information they are receiving today, and how can the consultation be fair on the submitters? Will councillors delay the 2050 growth plan until councillors do understand clearly the issues and are aware of all the live problems that exist within the 2050 growth plan? Why has council adopted a fundamental, flawed, unfinished Shepparton and Mooroopna flood mapping and flood intelligence study and emergency plan without conducting the study in accordance with the conditions of contract 1370? The terms of the contract have not been met. I believe the CEO was responsible to make Water Technology and their partners comply with the contract terms. Why has council adopted the Shepparton East urban flood study? The CEO response to my request for him to identify the breakaway point at the Broken River that allegedly floods the Shepparton East area. The CEO's response was that when he was investigating my request, it was found that errors had occurred in the modelling by the consultants. Then why is the council still using the Shepparton East urban flood study when council has admitted that there are errors in the study? Further proof is that the Broken Catchment Management Authority has not adopted or declared the Shepparton East urban flood study under Section 124 of the Water Act. That being the fact, where does it leave the councils if they adopt the 2050 growth plan in its current form? Council is obligated to provide a full list of reference and background documents to the community so the community can understand how the 2050 growth plan has been formulated. Why is council not complying with its adopted policies, being all its disclosure policies? Has council complied with Section 17C of the Water Flood Management Strategy and all relevant laws? Why would council not release a list of reference documents used that would inform the community and of of the documents and the weight placed on each document, as well as clearly understanding the information and if it is transparent in accordance with the council policies and laws. My verbal submission should be received by council as a positive and constructive view of my experience with the council officers that are in charge of the consultation process.
One more
My
minute.
view was formed because there is a partial release of reference and background documents. This concern would not have been raised if the officers had complied with the adopted policies and laws and released the documents, all the documents. I must reinforce the views of Councillor Sutton, Adams and Gerbinetti and Councillor Summers and O'Keefe when they voted at the ordinary meeting of the 20th of August to not adopt the growth plan until councillors could consult properly with the community and they wouldn't adopt it until that was done. Councillors are a board of directors of a corporation, the mayor is a chair. If you vote to adopt this 2050 growth plan, you'll be responsible for the consequences. I can only hope that you'll show strong leadership when dealing with the 2050 growth plan for the people in the community that placed their trust in you.
Thank you very much, Rocky, for that. Do we have any questions, councillors? Councillor Brophy?
Thank you. Over here, Rocky. Yep. Thank you for your submission and also for coming in today. My question is that you've highlighted there a number of flaws and concerns that you've raised over a period of time, and we appreciate that. Have you got something in terms of positivity going forward in regards to what the plan should look like?
Well, I believe that, well, for example, I'll give you one example and then
Yep.
I think that that's the best way.
Thank you.
This is a document that the council has adopted. It's the Greater Shepparton Freight and Land Use Study 2013. In that reference area, it has a Vic Roads traffic modelling dated for the proposed Shepparton bypass 2011. Now, I asked for that document, and I was told by a member of the consultation committee that, hang on, where is it? That she couldn't give it to me, that I had to go through the Freedom of Information Office. This is on the 24th of December. Now, how could I produce a document, a real submission to this council if it would take 60 days to get it from the Freedom of Information Officer? Those documents needed to be made available, and there should have been a list of those documents so I could actually prepare a full submission. I have not prepared a full submission. I've only partially given you a submission, and this is the amount of documents that I have sent backwards and forwards to this council. So that is not 6 pages. That's a lot of pages. That's a lot of emails that I've sent backwards and forwards. And I would really, I've been disadvantaged by not being able to be given those documents. Now, I can't see any reason, and I've written to the officer, I can't see any reason why I couldn't be given the documents. I would ascertain if those documents were relevant or not. Not the officer, not the council officer. I am the person that should decide if I can use those documents or not.
Thanks, Ray. I understand your point. My question was really, what is your aspiration in terms of going forward? That was all.
It needs to be clear to the community what is actually happening. Now, in my opinion, there are a hell of a lot of documents that say certain things that haven't been tested with, or the community hasn't been told about them, they haven't been tested. There hasn't been consultation on those documents, and I believe if council is complying with its transparency policy, with its community engagement policy, with its document document management policy, then I should be able to get all the information to be able to have and make an informed decision and an informed submission to this council.
Thanks, Rocky.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Rocky, for coming in today.